So on this Monday morning, our top story is the government says Lucy Letby could be forced to appear in court and face victims' families when she is sentenced. That will happen later today.
The baby killer is predicted to be handed a full life term and could be compelled to attend the sentencing if she continues to refuse.
Now, police believe the former nurse may have attacked as many as 30 more babies after detectives identify more suspicious incidents from her time at the hospital.
Well, so many questions, of course, swirling around this case. Let's speak to Oliver Lawrence, a former police officer and host of the Protect and Serve podcast. And whilst there are a great deal of very important and legitimate questions to answer, the focus today will be on sentencing. And the families really want her to hear their impact statement. So what do you think are the chances that she'll be able to wriggle out of sitting in the dock for that?
Well, good morning, Eamonn. Good morning, Isabella. I think certainly she should be fronting up. These families have waited 9 to 10 months through an incredibly traumatic trial, and they should have an opportunity to read out what will be incredibly upsetting victim impact statements. And Lucy Letby needs to hear those. She needs to understand the significant impact she's had on the lives of all these families. She needs to understand that their lives have been changed forever, and they need to be able to look at her in the eye whilst Justice Goss sentenced her to a life sentence. I think the difficulties here is that we don't want to coming up and causing scenes which then prevent the families from being able to give out those victim impact statements clearly and to be heard by everybody, the impact that this has had and will continue to have on their lives.
Not sure I agree with you on that point, Oliver. What we need to do is to get tough, get realistic, be on the side of victims in all of this. If she makes noise, pull her out of the court, bring her back in again for the next impact statement that is going to be made. Geiger, if it has to be, but absolutely deplorable that someone like her can walk away from the impact of what she has done, what she has created, and not feel awkward about it. That's the real crime.
I totally agree with you, Eamonn. We're dealing with a horrific, narcissistic individual who has got totally no regard for any of the victims. She showed no remorse throughout this entire trial, in fact, blaming her colleagues at times in a distraction attempt from the jury. But none of that worked. And I completely agree with you. She should have to sit there and listen to the impact her horrific crimes have had. But, you know, hopefully that will occur. Hopefully she will front up and hopefully she will listen to what the families have got to say. It's critically important as part of their healing process moving forward. So let's hope that occurs.
We all remember, of course, the awful murders of Olivia Pratt-Colbell, the little girl shot in Liverpool about a year ago, and also the murder of Zara Alina. Both of the murderers in those cases avoided the dock. But the families, really interesting, have come out over the weekend saying, look, the victims in this mustn't let this overtake them because actually, you know, they've been through enough already. But surely this just adds pressure and stress on the families. The government could have dealt with this situation and the way that sentencing happens after those two cases, couldn't they? What's the delay?
I totally agree with you, Isabel. There's clearly some issues here which the government have got to review. Minister Buckleby yesterday said on your programme that they were looking at it, that there would be reviews into this. So certainly, I think one has got to reflect on what we're dealing with, how we can make these offenders front up and listen to these victims, because what they say matters. What victims go through matters. And we've got to ensure these criminals who commit these abhorrent crimes, as has Letby, listen to what they have to say and understand the totality of the impact that they have had. But sadly, at the moment, they seem to be in far more control than they should be.
You know, it's amazing to me that they actually have the choice whether they can attend to be in the courtroom or not. I just thought they had to be there. I've never really heard.
Yeah, it's a new trend, isn't it?
It's a new trend. Yeah. That's exactly right. And it's something that should be really hit on the head and not tolerated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was reading that the advice has been updated to courts and to lawyers and the Crown Prosecution Service, and they can basically produce a sick note and say, look, as long as there's a legitimate reason, they can wriggle out of it. But otherwise, they've been advised that they can use reasonable force. Now, what does that mean? Are we talking about handcuffing or, as far as Eamonn's saying, you know, dragging them by the scruff of the neck and making them sit down? Because it's obviously not working, this reasonable force.
Yeah, so the reasonable force obviously has to be proportionate. You know, as a Western democracy, obviously we have some level of human rights, which is important to remember as a fundamental, but equally
Sorry, she didn't
understand
give
that
those
this is
children
an
human rights.
awful
You know, there
human-
wasn't reasonable force in what she did in murdering those children. So that sort of goes out the window with me. I think she's forfeited any right she has to anything.
No, Eamonn, I totally agree with you, 100%. She should have to come up. And by reasonable force, they may handcuff her, they may drag her up. But I think certainly Justice Goss has got an important job today in managing the courtroom, being able to deliver his sentencing, allowing the victims to deliver their victim impact statements. And he'll want that to be done in a controlled manner because he understands, as does the court, the importance of listening to those statements. So he will want little disruption, but equally, like us, he will also want her to understand what's happened. So, it's an important moment today.
Well